You know, I'd like to just phrase a question to this blonde student. I can agree that a sexual confrontation should be a bilateral commitment between two people, but I would like to say and a love that goes with it. But at a 15 and a 16 and a 17-year-old young adult who has not had any experiences or is just beginning to find out who they are, how can you make a wise or make a judgment and say, this is the one? And that's what I often wonder about young, you know, they don't have that many experiences to base a decision upon. I would just like to get some comments or feedback.
Okay.
From
Very challenging question for some of you young people here.
There's always going to be a first time. You're not going to have any experiences until you do it the first time anyway. So I think each teenager should be able to make their own choice on who they think the right person is to have their first experience with.
Okay, we have a phone call. There you go. Let's see what happens.
I think you should address that.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, hon. Hi, I'm 12 years old, and I wanted to have a question. Like, if a boy pushes you into sex and you're not ready for it, but he is, what happens if he pushes you into it and he's stronger than you are and you can't get away?
Okay, I think we have several people who want to respond to this. Several out in the audience, and Dr. Sinelli.
Yeah, I think this is really difficult because it's alarming at her age. There's a couple issues here. One is this 12 years old issue. But there are studies, and there was one just done in Rhode Island that pointed out that even as young as 10 and 11 years old, boys feel at that age that it's okay to insist that someone have sex with you for a variety of reasons. If you spend money on them, you take them out to dinner, whatever it is. So it's not that unusual to hear that comment, I think, today, that you can be pushed into sex for a variety of reasons. But what this all comes back to is that this young person needs to have those skills to, number one, know how to get out of a situation like that. How do I get out of it? How do I keep myself from getting into it? What do I say and what do I do? Because if you get to that point and you don't know, chances are you're not going to have that repertoire of skills to get out of it. And I think that these are things we could be doing in school programs. Right. Here's how you recognize a bad situation. Here's how you get out of a bad situation. Don't do something that feels wrong for you, that you're not comfortable with. Hopefully they have parents they can talk to about this. If not, go to teachers, go to counselors. I mean, just don't do it because you feel pressure, but it's real easy to say that. It's another thing to do it when you're in that situation. It might be too late.
Does that help you with your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
There are some other people who have answers. Don't get insulted, but I'm going to turn off the phone and you can listen to here, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Part of it, in some cases, gets back to the issue of assertiveness. Basically, being able to really say no when you mean no. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, even though I have to question however well-intentioned the Just Say No programs are working. We all wish they would work, but I'm not sure that that they really are working very well. But for an individual to say no, and to really be able to mean that is very important. And developing the skill to really assert yourself and the certainty within yourself to know that no means no is often very difficult.
I thank you.
I agree with that. If you say no, you're going to feel so good about yourself and really respect yourself. And if you're really in love with this guy, then he'll understand and he'll respect you if you say no, and he'll love you just as much.
This leads us into another area, if we could, because Father Heron mentioned earlier and talked about chastity, and Beth said about saying no, Dr. Sinelli, excuse me, and Dr. Lipkowitz now. I have a quote here, and I think some of you parents in particular might find this very interesting. It comes again from our sex educator, and this is under the area of advice for parents of the 80s. If you want your teenage daughter to wait until she's older to have sex, encourage her to say not now. No sex before marriage is an outmoded message, and teenagers either ignore it or rebel. I wonder how some of you feel about that. It certainly fits in with what you were just saying.
There was something on the caller's comment that concerned me, and I don't want to direct the program backwards, but it was the use of force. Yes. You're talking about a 12-year-old girl who I think it's important that if there's anyone that she trusts, her teachers, her parents, to let her know that at any age, force and sex are not the same things, and they are not part and parcel to each other. It concerns me that the tone, force can mean a lot of different things. It can mean coercion in a verbal way or in a physical sense, and that really has no place in sex.
All right, and that, maybe we should pursue that point for just a minute. Pat, I'd like to come back to you because you're working with the children who are that age. What would you suggest, and how would you suggest someone handle a situation like this?
Well, I think I would agree with my colleague from Westchester that we try at the middle school level to stress discovering yourself first before even engaging in anything of this total ramification of involvement of sex. As a matter of fact, tomorrow the whole school at Stewart Middle School will be involved or listen to a whole multi-media presentation from motivational media called Top 40, which is, I think, an excellent presentation, which centers on assertiveness, prioritizing your goals, really just getting your life in order and discovering who you are, and what you want to become. I think that's key in the whole growth development as far as centering on the middle school between-ager, if you will. We're talking about students that are just entering adolescence, beginning at age 12 on to 14 and 15 years of age. I will say that in Norristown is a unique community in the fact that we run the spectrum of a whole melting pot situation with quite a number of blended family situations, divorced families, separated families, step-parent families, etc. And I think that the students that involve themselves in sex equate, it feels good, so do it. They're looking for an extension of love. And I think this is what causes them to get in the problem of teenage pregnancies. Right now we have a number of girls that have found themselves in that situation, and they're devastated. I think that it goes to show, too, that when we talk about parent involvement, first of all, the parent has to be in communication with their child to know that their child, they should know when their child, their daughter, or their son is even thinking about getting involved in sex. I mean, I really think that the communication line should be that close. Hopefully that it's not just necessarily child-initiated, but it could also be parent-initiated. Because a lot of parents say, oh my goodness, gee, how did that happen? And I really think that it's the communication line. Not only the parents, but also we as educators and counselors, we should all get on the bandwagon and try to see how it is that we can do a preventive type program and a counseling type program, and more on the end of preventative area as opposed to, well, what happens, I mean, once the baby is entered.
Okay, thank you. That raises a couple of questions. Father Heron, you understand, and I'd like to direct the question both to Dr. Sinelli and Dr. Lipowitz growing out of this. Father Heron?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful that we don't simplify the issue of dealing with developing sexuality to simply individual skills. And I think Pat was just making a reference there where it has to be a whole support system. The school has to give a clear indication that they support people in trying to develop self-esteem, positive self-image, confidence, and that will enable them to make good, wholesome choices and decisions. But we have pressures from within that there is the reality of their sexual power, and kids are experiencing that younger and younger. How do we get them to recognize it and then be able to deal with it and express it in a relaxed, responsible, and even reverent manner? That's the inside pressure. Then they're getting pressured with, this young girl said that the girl should have a choice who she decides to have her first sexual experience with, you know. But the girl does like it when she can turn a guy on. That's in our culture. That's an accepted mode there. But how can she say, yes, I can express myself and exchange affection and intimacy, but again, in a relaxed response. So there's internal and external pressure, and there needs to be not just an individual stress, but a communal stress. I think that's lacking too.
Dr. Snow, you've worked recently with an in-service program with Downingtown, and what do you do? What concerns do you have? How do you treat this young kid that we've been talking about here, this younger kid than our high school age child?
Actually, the level we just finished at Downingtown was 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And so we were looking at putting in a curriculum at the elementary level. And it was very difficult to do because it's a conservative area, and we had a lot of media coverage last year when we started to initiate the program for a variety of reasons. What we try and focus on is explain to people when historically sex education has alarmed lots of parents and community, and there's been a lot of uproar about it. What we try and tell people is we're not going into the elementary level and talk about sexual intercourse and talk about sexual activities. That's not what we're doing. And we're not encouraging it. We're not giving out contraception. We're not selling abortion. These aren't the things that we're trying to do. What we try and do is talk about a comprehensive program that starts out very gradually with some of the exact same things that Pat was already talking about. Talking about families, talking about friendships, talking about relationships, how people interact with each other. And it's not until 4th grade when the hormones start to kick in that we start getting into talking about puberty, and then talking about dating situations, and talking about what this caller asked us about. And then we do talk about sexually transmitted diseases. And of course, that curriculum opted out of talking about contraception, which is very typical at the elementary level, that we don't discuss that until probably the middle school years and then high school years. So.
Okay, I'd like to also, we do have somebody on the phone line, but I also like, before we turn to this, to turn to Dr. Lipkowitz, just in terms of our own school district here in Norristown, do you see young children this age, 12 years old, who are coming to you or who have expressed problems like this?
Yeah, except I often see it more in the context of not just the possibility of rape, which was alluded to by this, but also in the context of sexual abuse. We're seeing a lot of young teens and older teens that have been abused sexually, either by strangers or, unfortunately, very frequently by family members. And this is, unfortunately, a very large, complex, and serious problem, which I think as a society we've only begun to deal with.
Okay. You're on with us. Would you please give us your question? Thank you for calling.
I just wanted to say, first of all, that I just think this is a really wonderful idea, doing this. I think this is going to inform a lot of people. I wanted to say that I'm 17 years old, and I can understand some of the views from the parents and some of the things they had to say. I think it's important that to stress the love in a relationship, because when a person chooses to go through with this, it happens one time. And I think it's very, very important to not let, I know peer pressure and everything has to step into it, because there's a lot of that, with anything, drugs and everything. But everybody has somebody to turn to. And if there's a problem or anything where you're having trouble with a boyfriend, you can go to that person and turn to them, like with a counselor or anybody you feel close to, and you can get the help that you need. And I just wanted to think that maybe sometimes when people go through with this, maybe they're not feeling so good about themselves, and it might be a low self-esteem, and they just feel like they have nowhere else to go, or they feel like they should go through with this because everybody else is doing it. But I just thought, I wanted to see what some of your views were on it, and I just felt like it was really important to stress the love part of it.
I don't think that that everyone is doing it has anything to do with it. I don't think. I agree. It's the feeling to be loved, to be needed, to be wanted by someone. That's where I think most people get into teen sexuality. That's when they have sex as a teenager. They don't have a parent to turn to. They don't have a best friend to turn to. They don't really, you know what I mean? They just, they have no one to talk to. And I'm sure you see a lot of, even the younger children have no one to talk to.
I think everybody has somebody though.
No. Even if you do have a best girlfriend, let's say, you can't go to her. She's your age. She doesn't know. I thought I knew everything. You could not tell me anything. Really. And I find out now that I didn't know anything. And I really didn't have anyone to go to. And I am not kidding when I say that. There was no one. Excuse me?
Have a low self-esteem.
Excuse me?
Have a low self-esteem.
I did, yes. I had no self-esteem at all. So I think teachers, I think it's their responsibility to step in at some time. I really do, especially when parents aren't there for their children. The teacher has to, or the child's just going to fall right through the cracks.
Thank you.
I would have to agree. There are so many young people that often do have no one to turn to, no one they feel they can express this to. I think personally that sex education should begin, needs to begin really in the home. The school can really only amplify and follow up on that. If sex education doesn't begin in the home, then it'll begin in the streets, which is still, unfortunately, I think where most sex education, however faulty it often is, will occur. I think another area that the schools need to be more involved in, although I realize this may be somewhat controversial, is that if students are going to be sexually active, teaching them to have sex responsibly, to use birth control methods so to avoid pregnancy and to avoid spread of disease, particularly AIDS. Unfortunately, the AIDS situation is a problem that many teenagers are really not that scared of. They feel they're going to live forever and nothing's going to kill or hurt them. Of course, their friends don't have it because even if you get it as a teenager, you're not going to get the disease until 5-10 years later. The teenagers worry about it as a vague fear, but when it comes down to the specific act, all thoughts that, oh, I'm going to get AIDS from this person, no, not this person, they're too nice. All thoughts of that goes right out the window. They are a little more concerned, at least, about pregnancy. But unfortunately, that fear doesn't always translate into taking proper precautions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think even if the child is brought up in a loving family situation, that peer pressure really can be incredible. And that we really do need to teach our children assertiveness skills, not through just a one-day program, but on a continuous basis through the school years. And I think that all ties in then with that assertiveness, feeling good about yourself, self-esteem, asserting yourself, and it ties it in being able maybe to say no or make the right choice for themselves.
Jen, if I could just kick in here, I think that Norristown has a fine health curriculum, and we're really making great strides in being leaders in that area. However, I think we really need to also take a closer look, at least on the middle school program, a need for additional counselors. We talk about preventative type programs, values clarification, prioritizing your goals, assertiveness training, knowing how to say no, addressing teenage issues, attacking this whole issue of teenage sexuality, not only from the biological and gender standpoint, as has been addressed here by this panel, but just everything in general. And certainly one counselor servicing 650 students is not going to do it. That leads us to believe, and I'd probably put my foot in my mouth right now, however, it leads us to believe that, our priority as a district needs to be looked at. Because I know in our particular building, our counselor, the minute she walks in, she's busy and she's exhausted to the time that she's leaving, servicing our students. She just does a fantastic job. But certainly, I know that I'm donning a lot of hats too, that I find myself in many instances as a quasi-counselor, listening and advising and counseling. And I just feel that 7-8 years ago, when we had more counselors in the middle school program, we were able to do this assertive trainingness type program, the values clarification, the magic circle type thing, where students can feel comfortable in group settings in talking about their feelings and expressing, not just in a curriculum-based type textbook, media presentation type things, but I think just on a one-to-one communicative level. And that's why when I was asked to be a member of this panel today, I quickly volunteered and said yes, because I think this is a need that we need to talk and to communicate about these key and important pressing issues.
All right, Father Heron?
Yes, I want to try to tie in with the mother who spoke about the parents' role there too. I have found in dealing with young boys and girls who have become genitally active that a major reason is that they've tried to assert themselves to their parents, and their parents have reprimanded them. Now, they're still young with their feelings, and they feel like they have been put down or neglected or not given the opportunity to express themselves. They're hurt by that. When they're hurt, they become vulnerable. And who do they go to or turn to? It's usually their boyfriend or their girlfriend. And a lot of times that's where a great danger takes place, that they need affection, they need to assert themselves. They get hurt at home, and then that's where that kind of subtle rebellion goes out. Well, I'll show my mom. I agree with Nancy, too, that at this age of 12 years old and all the way through, it's hard enough, even in the best of times, to develop a positive self-image, self-confidence, and esteem. And yet, that's where a lot of confusion and a lot of people, a lot of human life gets lost and gets slipped through. So they reach out and they grasp onto the first thing that they can, and then they get lost, and they get further confused, and they get caught in a vicious downward spiraling cycle. So that's why it has to happen on an individual, a school level, a family level. But then we have to come to some common ground and then develop a support system from all those different forces.
Okay, very good. We have our first male caller on the phone. Thank you for calling. Good evening.
Yes, hello. I'm a 16-year-old male, and I seem to be in the minority with this group. But I wanted to voice my view on this. And the way I see it, I think that it's less of a parental influence on the individual and less of peer pressure and more of the maturity of the individual. And when for example, when the male does not feel obligated to prove himself as a man, and when the female doesn't feel obligated to say yes, then they've reached a level of maturity, I think, that they're able to make the decision.
I don't think it's a level of mature. Like I said, I think it's a level of needing to be loved, to be cared about. I thought I was very mature in what I was doing, but I didn't find out years later that I wasn't mature at all. I don't think.